Hello, Fledge folks. My name is David Rodriguez, and you can probably tell right now I'm not doing this live, and I'm not at my desk or office currently, but I am here doing something of relevance. I'm actually testing out some functionalities of Fledge, and I'm here in Iceland, and I have a Raspberry Pi Zero running Fledge, and a sensor that I wrote a custom South plugin for that is collecting data at the moment. And whenever it has reception next, which is not looking too soon, but when it does, it'll be able to get it to HarperDB, and we'll be able to kind of take a look at it together.
I'm hiking the south half of the Laugavegur Trail. It's renowned for its natural beauty and diverse landscapes. So, along with collecting beautiful visual data with my eyeballs, I decided to collect some artificial sensor data as well. This made for a good next step in continuing my journey in learning about Fledge. I first tried out Fledge back in 2020. I come from the Windows OT world and the Pi system, so it was my first hands-on experience with a Linux application. Last year at my job at EDF, we were exploring ways to bring OPC UA data into Pi, and we evaluated Fledge as one of the options. I was really impressed with how much it had matured and how far it had come, so I decided to take a deeper dive into it, learn more about it, and share the knowledge I gained through videos as I go.
So let's get a better idea of the setup that I have with this lithographic PowerPoint slide that you could say I have here. So we have the Raspberry Pi Zero running Fledge with the BME 680 sensor attached. The BME 680 sensor is providing temperature, humidity, pressure, and air quality readings. This is a stand-in for my phone right here since I'm using it to record. And right here we have a cell phone tower. My phone is, when it can be, connected to the cell phone tower, and it's creating a Wi-Fi hotspot network that the Raspberry Pi is connected to. The South plugin on the Raspberry Pi, along with getting the readings from the sensor, is also getting GPS readings from my phone. I have an app on my phone called Share GPS. It makes my phone act as a GPSD server. I have a Python library on the South plugin that makes it act as a GPSD client. So I'm packaging the sensor data along with latitude and longitude, and then when we have our chance to send data out to HarperDB, it goes out through my phone to the cell phone tower and up to the cloud.
All right, so let's crack open Fledge and follow the data and see what it ends up telling us. So we got the Fledge GUI open here, which is connected to the Raspberry Pi Zero and gives us a really nice way to see what's happening inside of Fledge. We can see here on the main dashboard, we got events coming into Fledge and through the South plugin, and events being sent north to HarperDB over here on the right. So let's take a look at that custom South plugin. I have it right here. And you can see there's some just really easy ways to configure and reconfigure the plugin. For example, like whether or not I want to collect the GPS coordinates, and if so, what IP address to go check that GPSD server, which is my phone's IP. So yeah, and it ended up being like a really nice and easy experience getting the plugin set up. I found it most useful to look through this plugin developer guide. It kind of gives you a general idea of what you should be writing out. But of course, my style is just to copy paste whenever possible. So there's a great example here of using the DHT11 sensor. I will note that it is implemented a little differently if you actually look at it in the GitHub repository. So that's worth a look as well. But yeah, I found this very helpful in making my own. And this is what it is. I won't be able to go into this in full detail just because we're short on time. I do plan to make a full video about this, so if you are interested, feel free to check it out when it becomes available. And but yeah, so I created my configuration parameters here, like you saw in the GUI, just by using some of the other ones that I saw as examples. And there's really two main things that happen here, at least in my plugin, because I have a relatively simple one. I should mention that there are polled South plugins as well as asynchronous South plugins. I'm keeping it simple with polled. I don't need to get that complicated quite yet. So when initializing the plugin, I am creating a sensor object. I am using a Python library by Pimoroni to read the BME 680 sensor. So I'm creating a sensor object when it initializes and setting it up with some configuration as well. I am also passing in all the configuration that I set here, as well as anything else if I wanted to, into something called a handle. And Fledge holds on to that handle and will send any of the functions that it calls in this South plugin. It'll give it that handle just so that it can use any state information if you'd like, which is pretty nice. So this is where the actual action happens. And so this is where we actually pull the sensor and try and send it back to Fledge. So first I try and get the GPS coordinates. If I'm not able to, I just leave it at 0, 0, null island, and then try to read the sensor. And then I will package everything up into a JSON format and send it back to Fledge. So yeah, that's really the majority of what's happening here. And when it actually comes to implementing it, you just need to take this .py file and drop it in this folder path here. Well, you actually need to make a folder first. So I gave it a title BME680. And then you just drop that BME680.py file in there is how I did it. And not to mention, I also needed to make sure to install the libraries like I'm using for the GPS client and the sensor on this particular Raspberry Pi Zero. Yeah, but that's pretty much what it took to start bringing your own data into the Raspberry Pi and into Fledge. So we got data coming into Fledge. Now we got to get it out, right? Let's send it to HarperDB. Now there's already a North plugin built for this, and I can't emphasize enough how easy this was. It was just a matter of creating a free account and going to the North plugin here, specifying the URL, my credentials, and coming up with a schema name. That is pretty much it. Within a few minutes, I had data coming in into HarperDB. Here's the studio. Not really much else to show here. I mean, data's coming in, and we want to try and visualize it, right? So I saw that there was an integration to Google Data Studio. I had never tried it before, but I saw that it had a way to do some geospatial visualization. So to get it out, it was just a matter of creating a SQL statement. I ended up like when I do the query, I concatenate together latitude and longitude because that's the just the format that the map component needs in Google Data Studio. And yeah, so it ends up looking like this structure here. I also format the timestamp string into a proper date time that these components expect. And this is what it looks like. So this is actually my second day heading back out. The first day I was plugging and unplugging Fledge a lot, like the Raspberry Pi, turning it on and off. So there were a good amount of gaps along the way, but this was a pretty solid read. And yeah, I mean, I have, it was really easy to actually make the component itself, just a lot of drag and drop. The color reflects the temperature, and the size of the bubbles reflect the humidity. So it does kind of, I mean, it makes sense. I remember this part of the hike here being particularly hot. And I remember by the time I got back to where I am now, I was definitely ready for a hot shower. So yeah, one of the other things to point out here, this is humidity data from day one. I wanted to take a look at this over time just to see what the humidity was like during a couple rain showers that happened. And unfortunately, you can see here we have a lot of duplicate timestamps. What I believed happened here is the Raspberry Pi, when I was unplugging it and replugging it in, was probably happening at certain times when I didn't have reception. And so the Raspberry Pi doesn't have a real-time clock or any kind of timekeeping device if the power is disconnected. Usually other computers have like like one that has powered by like a little battery. So yeah, unfortunately, it couldn't pick up the time quite correctly when it got plugged back in without reception, and kind of messed up some of the timestamps. So that's a useful lesson learned when trying to do things with intermittent power and data. So yeah, that's essentially the gist of it here.
Anyway, I figured this would be a good time as any to thank everyone that works on the project for Fledge. It's an incredible tool that I'm coming to really enjoy so far. Um, I'd like to thank the company Simon, the Icelandic telecom company, for their incredible wireless service and 4G connection and some crazy remote parts that lets you work in places that feel like it shouldn't be possible. And finally, I'd like to thank you for tuning in and checking this out. I hope you got something useful out of it. And yeah, see you around.